Hello everyone and welcome to Taking the Pain Out of School Trip Management, brought to you by Operoo. This is our agenda for today. I'm going to start by defining what end-to-end trip management is, look at the current setup in schools and how this process can be improved through digitisation and automation. I'll take you through a demo of Operoo for trip management and talk about some schools who've succeeded using Operoo. Now, for most schools, trips and visits play an essential role in supporting students' education, mental health and development, as well as creating unforgettable experiences and improving educational outcomes. Students love them and they're hugely beneficial. But for school staff, organising safe and successful school trips is a lot of work. So our aim today is to show you how you can make that process simple for staff while ensuring everything is signed off properly internally and students are looked after. And we'll finish up today with a Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions as we go through the webinar, please do put them in the question box as we go along and I'll answer them at the end. Or if we run out of time, I'll come back to you directly after the session today. By way of introduction, my name is Tom Owen. I'm one of the team looking after Operoo in the UK. Operoo is a school productivity and process automation platform. We help thousands of schools and other organisations to eliminate slow, expensive and repetitive tasks. If you want to make operational changes or just remove bits of paper and manual processes in any area across your school, we may well have a solution for you. Some schools engage with Operoo to solve one issue, like trip management. Others use us to consolidate processes across their school. Okay, let's dive into our key subject for today, school trip management. Let's start by looking at the current setup. And I will say from the outset that every school we work with is unique. Each school has their own way of managing trips. They have paperwork specific to them and a specific route that paperwork needs to take through their schools. I'll talk through some overview areas of our process today, but please be assured, if you have something outside of what we look at today, it's likely we'll have a solution. Okay, trips for most schools mean loads of paperwork and manual processes, starting with internal paperwork. Everything from trip applications to finance approvals and budgeting through to booking transport and accommodation. Each part of a school's process will also have a workflow sitting behind it with different levels of approval required. By a workflow, I mean who has to approve our forms. It could be my application needs to go to my head of year, then finance staff, then our EVC, and finally onto SLT for approval, which could mean paperwork ends up sitting on different desks or clogging up email inboxes or getting lost. Or maybe this is just too complicated for staff. They don't know what they have to do and when, or you have staff who try and circumnavigate the process that you've put in place entirely. Once we've waded through your internal processes and got the trip approved, we then need to send information to parents, collect consents, payments and other information, alongside extensive duty of care information, which you may already have, but don't know if this data is still up to date. And depending on what answers you get, different actions will have to take place. These are normally down to someone having to read the relevant information and take subsequent actions. For example, I tell you as part of my consent form that my child is currently taking some medication, let's say for an ear infection. This one piece of information needs to be known by trip staff. We need further information on what the requirements are. Medical staff in school need to know. We might need to put them into a specific group for those taking medication on the trip. But who makes sure this happens? For many schools, this is whoever reads the consent form, having to remember these multiple actions with potential for human error, missing something. Then all of this data gets collated and reprinted into a trip pack, which is a GDPR nightmare and often ends up left in someone's car or amazingly just goes missing entirely. Plus, if something were to happen on this trip, how easy is it for you to find the information you need? If you've got the pack, you're flicking through it, trying to find the right person. But if Mr. Smith over the other side of the museum has the trip pack, whilst a child in your care has an asthma attack, the data is useless to you. For most schools, the status quo is long-winded, time-consuming, expensive, and frustrating, and with a lack of duty of care information at the right time could put students at risk. But there is an alternative. Schools use Operoo to manage their whole trip process from end to end in one digital system. From staff completing applications to approval workflows to move data through your school, parents completing consents, verifying and updating existing duty of care information, then on-trip staff having access to all the relevant information and data. And crucially, Operoo is completely customizable to mirror your school's unique process. Talking of process, Operoo is a process tool for schools, not just a platform for forms and data. This means we have specific pieces of functionality to automate your process, not just digitize what you already have. This is a bird's eye view of Operoo in action. Schools can create completely bespoke forms or communication to kick off any process. Then you can add approval workflows. Who needs to approve or reject the data collected and in what order? You can distribute to specific audiences. This could be all of your staff or parents of children in year 7 with asthma who are going on a specific trip and have an out-of-date EHCP. Operoo works on any device, wherever you can access the internet, so schools get instant responses. We then use triggers to follow up that data. Triggers mean you can take specific actions based on any piece of data. Anyone who doesn't respond gets reminded, and you can analyze all of this data in our administration setup. To go into triggers in more detail, when you collect data as part of a process, there are normally some specific follow-up tasks which need to happen based on what is completed. And Operoo's triggers mean you can set up your actions once and then they run consistently. Based on the example I gave earlier, before going on a trip, a parent is asked if their child is currently taking medication. If the answer is yes, Operoo will instantly ask the parent for all the relevant information. Then inform the school nurse, the trip leaders and other staff. Put that student into a specific group for medication required on trip and use that group as a way of informing parents that the medication has been taken. All triggered by that parent ticking the box to say that their child requires medication. To dig into trip management in more detail, let's look at some successful schools using Operoo. Each one of these examples is part of a case study, which I'll send each of you in full after this webinar. Felpham College plan over 100 educational visits a year, which were entirely paper-based, aside from some information which had to digitally be sent to a local authority system. This meant school trips were a huge logistical workload for teachers, admins, and parents. Using Operoo, Felpham College took its school trip management from that resource-intensive paper-based process to a seamless digital experience, giving staff their time back, enhancing parent engagement, student participation, data security, and the school's ability to efficiently meet its duty of care obligations. An additional functional advantage Operoo gave Felpham is on trip communication. This is a quote from Phil Rayner at Felpham. We had a ski trip to Austria, which involved a 24-hour coach ride home. On the penultimate day, there was a minor accident. A lorry backed into our coach in the car park. The damage was bad enough to require a replacement bus, creating a significant delay, which altered our scheduled arrival time back at school. As the staff member on call for that particular trip, I was able to sit at my kitchen table and use Operoo to communicate with parents, inform them of the delay, and keep them up to date. I could easily access all of the same information about the cohort attending that trip that was available to the staff directly. But that wasn't the end of the saga. Again from Phil. Then, just as we finished updating all of our parents, we had another unexpected delay. The replacement coach broke down, but with Operoo, I was able to communicate the latest setback whilst keeping the parents and school informed of the group's progress. To put this experience into perspective, Phil said that he'd previously encountered a similar situation during another of Felpham's international trips. The difference, the school hadn't implemented Operoo. Phil again. This was a slow, stressful experience. I remember sitting there, working my way down a paper list of contacts, manually entering parents' details into my phone, sending one text message and repeating the process dozens of times. Having endured a similar situation before, I can truly say that Operoo is worth its weight in gold. And there's a number of other successes that Felpham have had with Operoo, which are outlined on the screen. Again, we'll make that case study available to you. Our second example, Bootham School in York, has part of its mission to provide a well-rounded educational experience that extends beyond the classroom. Bootham conducts a large number of local, national and international school trips for its boarders. Every trip requires up-to-date medical information and parent consent for each participating student. And as Assistant Head James Ratcliffe explains, maintaining that heavy schedule was beginning to take its toll on parents and staff alike. We manually drafted, distributed and collected paper forms for every field trip the school conducted, said James. Parents were sick and tired of completing the same information and forms over and over again. Some kids go on 12 trips a year, which meant filling in the same thing literally every month. Additionally, staff were spending far too long on these recurring operational tasks. Our paper-based nature of record keeping also meant the student medical information and emergency contacts were physically stored in a central file, which staff couldn't actually access when required. The success of a school software can often be measured best by the feedback from key users. This is certainly true for Bootham School. Staff simply love it, said James. I'm pleasantly surprised by the way Operoo has been adopted. Many of our staff have worked at the school for over 30 years and can be sceptical of new systems. I'm impressed we've won them over. Parents got on board really quickly too, much faster than expected. Parents are really happy with the enhanced level of communication Operoo enables the school to deliver, as well as the reduced administrative workload on their end. Our Chinese parents are particularly happy with the multi-language capabilities. In fact, we've had translators assess forms we've converted to Chinese who've been really impressed with the results. Above all else, James said that Operoo had saved Bootham School a ridiculously large amount of time when organising and running school trips. The contrast between how we operate now and our old paper-based system is astounding, said James. At this point, I'm going to hop over to a live demo so you can see what's possible. This is the Operoo form library. As a member of staff in your school, I can access the form library whenever I want to start a process. Operoo has a process builder where, as an administrator, you can customize each process, form and workflow completely to your school's requirements. So what we'll look at today are examples of what can be done. As a member of staff, if I'm in your MIS, no matter what MIS you use, I will automatically be synced into Operoo. You can also set up single sign-on. You can also set up a single sign-on account in Operoo. So for example, my Operoo login could be the same as my school Microsoft login. In addition, each process has its own URL and QR code. So this can be published anywhere from shared staff drives to being posted on walls of the staff room, all designed to make it as easy as possible for staff to access the forms and the processes you want them to complete. As I scroll down the form library, you'll see there's a wide range of different processes in here. I spoke about schools using Operoo to cover a broad range of operational tasks, but we'll head down and we'll have a look at trip management. Schools generally take one of two routes to start their trip management process. Either they ask for lots of information up front or ask for a few details to send specific follow-up tasks. Let's start with the collecting lots of data option. And let's go down here to our day trip form. This is an Operoo form, as I said, completely customizable to your requirements, but I have a series of questions which I need to fill in, things like name of trip, the trip leader, accompanying staff. As I scroll down, you'll see there are a bunch of different questions. Everything with a red star is a required field, so you're not getting half completed forms back. I've also got the option down at the bottom to save for later, should I need to. Now, at the bottom of our form, underneath a option to upload additional documentation, you can see I've got a workflow. In this case, the form, once submitted, will go to our EBC for approval, then our senior management team, And finally, finance. This is a linear workflow, but like the forms, this is customizable to your route for this particular data. It might be it needs to go to line manager, EVC, and finance all at once. Then if they sign it off, it goes to catering and transport. Once they've completed their elements, it goes on to our senior leadership team. However, you need to move the data through your school. To show you how these workflows work, let's go back to our other option, the trip pro forma. Let's go to start this form. I've got a smaller amount of questions in here. This is designed to ask me a few questions which dictate the forms and process I follow. I'm asked for a trip leader. Let's say that's me. We'll confirm. And then I'm asked for some details of the trip. Let's call it our stargazing trip. Yes, we've done this trip before. It's a residential trip, and it's going to be in January next year. Let's call it stargazing 2023. Okay. Each one of these questions can trigger specific follow-up actions. For example, because of the answers because of the answers I've given that we've done the trip before, that it's a residential trip, I will be sent a specific risk assessment, specific finance forms, etc., depending on these details. It's also worth mentioning that as well as data, you can collect digital signatures. I'm using my mouse to sign here as part of any form. And this form has a very simple workflow. It's going to go to our head teacher. So let's submit our form and walk you through what the member of staff in the workflow then sees. In this case, that's going to be our head teacher. Okay. I'm going to switch accounts to our head teacher's account and log in as the head teacher. Now, when that form was submitted, our head teacher received an email with a link asking them to complete their part of the workflow. If this email was missing or ignored, follow-up reminders are automatically sent by Operoo at a frequency you set. So that might be every 2 days that my head teacher gets that reminder they have a task in Operoo. This massively cuts down on the paperwork clogging up desks and inboxes and stops the need to chase staff for responses. This view that I'm in at the moment is Operoo Central. I can see all of my open tasks and workflows in one place. The trip pro forma is here at the end as an approval. When I click on this link, I can see the data which has been filled in. I can also see any other stages of the workflow. There aren't any for this particular one, but I could see other sign-offs if we had a more complex workflow. And then at the bottom, I have a couple of questions I need to answer as my part of the process. I have an approval and the opportunity to add some notes. So I'm going to approve this and say, all fine, have a great trip. And then I would sign if I didn't have my signature already in here. If this form was rejected, let's say that the date was not suitable, the person originally submitting the form would be notified and would have the option to change the date and resubmit the form. So this is moving data forwards and backwards, depending on what that data is through your school. And then I would save. Again, if I didn't respond to that, I would get reminders at a frequency you set. This is how workflows operate, notifying those with tasks, moving the data through your school, automatic reminders for non-respondents. Let's head back now to our first member of staff, who will now have some follow-up tasks. Okay, my trip received that initial fine. Okay, my trip has received that initial sign-off. I now need to complete all the other documentation associated with it. You can see in my tasks at the top here, I have a risk assessment and a finance form, but this could also be cover requests, transport bookings, etc. Whatever I need based on your school setup, and this could be time. So 2 months before the trip is due, I have to fill out my cover request, but it might be that I have to fill out my risk assessment straight away. If I go into my risk assessment, you'll see I have a date at the top by which I need to respond to this by. And then I have a series of questions. Some of this is pre-filled data with certain information, but the rest are gaps which I need to complete and submit. Within Operoo, there is a series of templates which you can pick up and create, or you can build your own within the system. Once I've completed all of this data, whatever that data might be, my risk assessments, my finance forms, all of this data is contained within the Operoo administration side of the system, and it's all searchable. So if you're the EVC or an administrator, you can see all of the trips and current documents in one view, see what stage they're at, what's been approved, what's been rejected. This is how Operoo deals with the internal processes for trip management. At this stage, I'm going to move on to the parent-facing side of Operoo. I'm going to start by bringing up my mobile onto screen. Operoo is available on any device, so any user could be working with our iOS or Android apps, or mobile, tablet, or desktop browser versions. But Operoo is the same data and information no matter what device. It's a bit easier to see this on the webinar in the desktop version, but I did just want to highlight that the information is going to be exactly the same no matter which device you are using. Let's go over to the same screen in our desktop version. This is Amy's parent account. Again, any parent or student in your MIS will automatically have their data synced across into Operoo. Each individual has their own login, so you know exactly who is filling in and accessing data. I'm going to start down here with our student record. Let's go into Amy's. One of the issues with the status quo for some schools is that their parents are asked to fill in the same information multiple times over a school year. The Operoo student record is designed to show the information you currently hold for each student. Then as a parent, I have the option to make any changes. You can see I've got various bits of information here: personal details, addresses, contact information, dietary requirements, medical conditions, and then safety alerts associated with those particular conditions. You'll see we've got edit buttons over here, which we can come in and edit and update information. We can also associate other documents with that particular profile. For example, I've got a passport, including passport images here. I've got vaccine status, which is becoming increasingly important for our schools. So any documentation we want as part of this profile, we can have in here. It's then accessible by parents, editable. You can have follow-up actions based on anything which is filled out within this, including getting data back into your MIS. Okay, let's jump out of that student record and have a look at some other functionality. I'm going to start at the top with news. News is used by schools for anything they want parents to read without needing a response, including things like newsletters, reminders, notices, or in the case of our trip here, things like packing lists for our ski trip. I also have requests. In the same way as staff, each request I get a notification for, either via email, push notification, or text message. If I don't respond to these notifications, I get reminders until I do come in and respond. Let Operoo do the chasing for you. Let's head into my request for a battlefield tour. Again, this particular form is customized to your specific requirements. I have a date we need to respond by at the top. Again, I have a date at the top, which I need to respond to this by. I then have a letter, an outline with some links out to different activities. As a parent, I can add the event to my external calendar. I then have a series of questions. First up is an activity choice. Operoo has specific functionality around limited availability of space. In this instance, 3 activities with a set number of spaces. Flanders Fields Museum is fully booked, so as a parent, I need to choose another option. Let's choose Tyne Cot. This can then be used to manage waiting lists. It's also used for managing things like sports clubs, extracurricular activities, etc. This question can also trigger a follow-up action. For example, putting Amy into a time cot group. So whoever looks after that group knows exactly who should be there. The same is true for our next question. Pickup location. Again, we could have a register of people who need to be picked up from the airport or from school. Then I have a question on medical. Let's use the example I used earlier. Amy's currently taking medication for an ear infection, so I need to let you know about that. We then have payments. Operu's payments are powered by Stripe. So I can pay in line with my form, or if you have an existing payment provider, we can link to them at this point. I then need to accept and sign to the terms and conditions you define. And here I've got some information about care profile being up to date, what happens in terms of illness or accident, and I submit my form. That event then comes down here to our Battlefield tour date. So I can come in here and see upcoming events, view my responses, still add them to my calendar if I need to. Okay, you'll see that I spoke about that medication as a trigger. You'll see that I've been automatically sent some follow-up asking me about that administration of medicine. So I've got further questions I need to fill in. What's the medication? Why are we taking it? Who's going to administer it? Take a photo of it, various things like that. One other option for your parents, which was outlined in the Felpham case study, is our multi-language capability. As a parent, when I first log into Operu, I'm asked what language I would like the interface in, but I can come and change that at any point by going to our globe icon. And let's go for Chinese, as that was the example in the Felpham case study. Then if I go back into my administration of medicine permission form, this form, along with all communication, events, etc., via Operu, come to me in my chosen language. This is all user-defined as well. So you don't need to decide which parents get which form in which format. The parent decides. That's then how they get all of their communication. And we can reset to English at any time. So we've collected all of our internal documentation. We've now collected all of our parent documentation. Now let's pull that all together in a trip pack or event document. Again, I'm going to pull up my mobile, this time to show you that when we look at trip packs, all of the data we'll look at is available using this offline mode in the Operu app. So if I'm halfway up a mountain on our ski trip and an incident happens, I don't need mobile signal or Wi-Fi to access all of the duty of care information, incident reports and things like that, which I'm going to show you in a second. But again, this is slightly easier to see on desktop via a webinar. So let's go over to the same screen. If I go to, again, our trip leader login. And if I scroll down to the bottom of our login, you can see I've got a group shared with me. This is our trip pack of data for our 2022 ski trip. Let's start with our event documents. This is where you can pull together documents created in Operu. So all those forms, sign-offs, cover documents, plus any external documents which you want to upload into Operu. So that could be your transport confirmations, your tickets, anything like that. All of it available in one place for either the trip leader or members of staff on that trip. Then, if I head back to our student side, you have all of the information on the students. So that starts with our student profiles. So if I go into an individual student, I can see all of their contact information, their medical conditions, I can see their action plans. If we need an asthma action plan, I can dive into that. We can also see the permission, the form which was signed for them, all of the details of that particular form. I can take registers if I need to come in and take a register for the students on a particular trip. I can also send messages home. So the example from the Felpham case study. So if we wanted to say, okay, we want to send all of our priority one parents an SMS from the ski trip to say bus is 30 minutes late, we can translate it to the user's preferred language. Then we can send that SMS to that group of parents. We can also see associated documents. So here I've got all of the students on this particular trip. I've got all of their passport information in one file, should I need it, including scanned copies of all of their passports. And finally, if an incident were to happen whilst we're on this trip, we can use student logs to manage this. Let's say an incident happens to Laura. I've just clicked on student logs. You'll see student logs are used for all sorts of things, from administration and medication to house points, behaviour reporting. And for our trip, we might want to manage incidents. If a student gets bumped on, let's say Laura got a bump on the head, I can come into this injury report, add a new log, choose the specific student. It was Laura. And then I could say that she bumped her head, whatever the details of it might be, whatever questions you need me to fill in as part of this. Once this is all filled in, this will go through a workflow. In this particular instance, whilst I'm out on this trip, I fill in this form, it comes back into school and goes to our school nurse. Our school nurse then reviews this information and can share this with the parents if they need to, depending on the type of incident. Okay. Going back to our end-to-end trip management outline, what you've just seen is this in action. Staff can easily start the trip management process. Approvals are routed to the correct staff at the right time, and follow-up tasks and documentation are automatically triggered. Once the internal documentation is complete, parents fill in their consents, approvals, choices, and confirm duty of care information. Then all of that data is put into a digital trip pack, which is available offline if required. And at the end of the trip, follow-up tasks can take place, whether that's students filling out feedback forms or just archiving that trip for future reference. One platform to digitize your whole trip management process.